A brash tourist thought his money gave him the right to humiliate anyone, even a stoic royal guard. Crossing the line, both figuratively and literally, he turned the scene into a spectacle, mocking tradition in the heart of Buckingham Palace. But when a lost child's cries pierced the chaos, the guard did something so unexpected, it silenced the crowd and left the tourist scrambling for cover. What happened next would not only redeem the day, but remind everyone of the true meaning of honor and humanity. Let's start at the beginning. London's weather was as predictable as ever, a dull gray sky, a light breeze, and the constant threat of rain. Yet none of this deterred the throngs of tourists crowding Buckingham Palace. The courtyard buzzed with activity. Families posed for photos, guides shouted over the din, and children darted through the clusters of people, laughing and shouting. Amid this chaos stood James Carter, a young royal guard with a figure as unyielding as a marble sculpture. His polished buttons gleamed under the pale light, his towering bearskin hat perched perfectly, and his expression, calm and stoic, remained unbroken. Every inch of him exuded tradition and discipline, a stark contrast to the frenetic energy surrounding him. For most onlookers, he was an awe-inspiring sight. For others, however, he presented an irresistible challenge, and among the latter was a man in his 40s, wearing a garish t-shirt emblazoned with a slogan that screamed his self-perceived charm. Judging by his smug grin, he clearly believed the world revolved around him, or at least it should. This self-appointed star of the show strutted to the forefront of the crowd and yelled, "Hey mate, give us a smile!" What, did they program you to be a robot? His voice cut through the chatter, drawing amused chuckles from nearby tourists. Encouraged, he swaggered closer to James. With the boldness of someone who mistakes disrespect for humor, he reached out, his fingers just inches away from the famous bearskin hat. "Who does that? Seriously, would you try to poke the nose of Michelangelo's David?" "No, but somehow people think it's fine to treat the royal guards like props." James didn't flinch. He remained as still as ever, but the tension in his jaw betrayed his inner conflict. The man, clearly undeterred by James's composure, decided to escalate his antics. Digging into his pocket, he pulled out a coin and flicked it onto the ground near James's boots. "Here you go, mate. A tip for your performance," he declared, his voice dripping with condescension. The crowd reacted in a cacophony of murmurs. Some giggled awkwardly, finding the spectacle amusing. Others exchanged disapproving glances and whispered, "That's just not right, such disrespect." Phones appeared in hands as people eagerly recorded the scene, because of course, if it's not on social media, did it even happen? The man, emboldened by the attention, took things further. He crossed the white line, the unspoken boundary of respect, and stepped closer to James. With his phone extended at arm's length, he grinned. "Let's take a selfie. A royal guard in the background. Now, that's what I call a souvenir." The tension was palpable. It felt as though the courtyard held its collective breath, waiting for what would happen next. But before the situation reached a breaking point, something else drew the crowd's attention. A small voice, distant yet piercing, crying out in distress. A few meters away, a small boy, no older than 5, stood frozen amidst the chaos. His tear-streaked cheeks glistened in the pale light, and his wide eyes darted around in panic. His cries of "Mommy! Daddy!" barely pierced the cacophony of the crowd. Yet, despite his obvious distress, the tourists around him seemed oblivious. Phones in hand, they remained consumed by their quest for the perfect photo. And isn't that just the state of things? A child crying for his parents, but heaven forbid someone paused their selfie spree to notice. But someone did notice. James Carter, the very embodiment of discipline, felt a flicker of unease break through his otherwise impenetrable resolve. His duty demanded he remain still, a sentinel unmoved by anything short of a direct threat. Yet the sight of the child's trembling form stirred something deeper, something human. The internal conflict was evident in the subtle shift of his posture. Protocol was clear. Leaving his post was not an option. But as the boy's cries grew louder, James found himself moving. Not hurriedly, not rashly, but with a calm precision that spoke of his character. The crowd collectively inhaled as James took a step forward, his first deviation from the steadfast composure they'd come to expect. Even the boisterous tourist from before fell silent, his smug expression giving way to bewilderment. James knelt down before the boy, his tall frame suddenly more approachable, his polished armor less intimidating. "Don't be scared, little one," James said, his voice low but steady, carrying the weight of reassurance. "We'll find your parents." The boy, startled but comforted by James's presence, sniffled and nodded. The scene, simple yet profound, held the crowd captive. Cameras were raised, but this time there was no mockery, only awe, and there it was, a stark contrast. While some had spent their energy mocking a symbol of tradition, here was a man proving why those traditions mattered. With measured gestures, James pointed toward the nearest security officer. His actions were deliberate, his words to the officer clear and direct. The boy, sensing he was in safe hands, began to calm down. His cries turned to quiet sniffles, and he clung to James's arm as though it were a lifeline. The tourist antagonist, meanwhile, stood awkwardly in the background. The bravado that had fueled his earlier antics had vanished, replaced by a sheepish expression. For perhaps the first time, he seemed to grasp the gravity of his actions, or at least feel the weight of the crowd's judgment. As the boy was escorted toward the security station, a wave of applause rippled through the spectators. It wasn't loud or theatrical, but carried a sincerity that left no doubt about its meaning. James, now back on his feet, returned to his post with the same unyielding grace he had displayed before. But this time, he wasn't just a guard in a polished uniform. To those watching, he was a symbol of humanity's best qualities: discipline, compassion, and an unwavering sense of duty. And the man in the garish t-shirt? He slowly retreated, no longer the center of attention, no longer as sure of himself. Perhaps he'd learned a lesson, or perhaps he'd just wait for another crowd to perform for. Either way, James Carter remained a silent reminder of what it truly means to stand tall. As the security officer led the boy away, the crowd parted like the Red Sea. From the far end, a man and woman, panic etched across their faces, pushed their way through. "Oliver!" the woman cried, her voice trembling with relief and fear. The boy broke into a run, flinging himself into his mother's arms. The reunion was swift and emotional. The mother knelt to embrace her son, tears streaming down her face, while the father gripped the boy's shoulders protectively. The crowd, now silent, erupted into applause, a thunderous acknowledgement of what they had just witnessed. Someone even shouted, "Now that's a real hero." The words hung in the air, drawing approving murmurs and nods. And let's be honest, what else could you call James Carter in this moment? Not just a guard, but a symbol of unwavering duty and compassion. In stark contrast, the once boisterous tourist stood off to the side, his earlier swagger completely extinguished. His garish t-shirt, which moments ago screamed confidence, now seemed like a bad joke. He tried to melt into the crowd, awkwardly pulling his baseball cap lower to shield his face from the many recording phones. His friends, who had laughed and egged him on, suddenly found the ground beneath their feet very interesting. Funny how the tables turn, isn't it, when the cameras are no longer laughing with you, but at you. Meanwhile, a video of the entire event, shot from the perfect angle, was already making its way online. Within minutes, captions like "Royal Guard breaks protocol to save a child" and "The humanity behind the uniform" began flooding social media. Viewers around the globe watched and rewatched as James knelt to help the boy, each replay further cementing his status as a quiet hero. Back at the palace, James returned to his post with the same composed demeanor he had displayed before. His movements were deliberate, unhurried. Adjusting his bearskin hat, he stood tall, resuming his position as though nothing extraordinary had just occurred. The applause subsided into respectful silence, and the crowd regarded him with a newfound admiration. A small British flag was placed near the white line, an unspoken gesture of gratitude from an anonymous bystander. James didn't acknowledge it, but the simple act carried a weight that words couldn't. And the man in the loud t-shirt? As he shuffled away, clearly hoping no one recognized him later in the inevitable viral video, he muttered under his breath, "Maybe they're not as stiff as I thought." "Oh, you think?" Perhaps next time, leave the antics at home. With the day's drama behind him, James remained as steadfast as ever, a silent reminder to the onlookers of what true dignity and honor looked like. As the crowd slowly dispersed, conversations lingered, many reflecting on the importance of respect for tradition and the humanity that lies beneath the surface of even the most stoic figure. And so, the story of James Carter, the royal guard who broke protocol for a child, became a testament to the enduring power of compassion and duty, a lesson not only for one tourist, but for everyone who witnessed it, in person or online,